All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here today with two members of a band that is relatively new to me, and we'll get into this, but I've definitely heard the name before. When you reached out about coming on the podcast, I don't know if it's just from seeing it on posters or show listings or whatever, but I mean, it was a name that I had certainly heard many times before. So I think the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourselves and the band, and then what you do in the band, so listeners can put a name to the voice.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. We are DD and the Deadbeats. We're a party blues band. We've been around since about early 2010 here in the city. We played mostly Winnipeg, but the surrounding areas over the years. Festivals, private gigs, local bars. It's kind of been our home. We've had some rotating members over the years, but since 2020 or 2016, I should say, our core members have been myself, Dylan Bukowski, our bass player Jack Sherrard, our sax player Steve Sarens, and that's when our singer Dusty From over here joined the band. And we've had a little bit of a carousel of drummers over the years, but our current drummer Carol, who's been a rock for us the last few years, is our current member who did our last album with us. So.
Cool.
Or EP, I should say.
Well, and I guess that's why I think the name has been familiar, just because you have been around for, like you said, since it's been more than a decade now, right? So seeing it on show listings and things like that, for sure.
Right.
Where do you think that you fit in within the local music scene? And I know you just a couple minutes ago described yourselves as a party blues band. I mean, Winnipeg has so many different scenes and so many different sort of like smaller sub scenes within those larger scenes, and different venues that cater to different sounds. At this point, have you figured out sort of where you fit in and found other bands that are kind of, like-minded, whether they sound like you or not? Do you have a place where you kind of feel comfortable at this point?
I'd say that the blues genre is definitely where we tend to fit a little bit better. But we could branch out on the rock side too. Like even when we play our more, quote unquote traditional blues, for lack of a better term, we always say we kind of deadbeat it up. So it can be a slower traditional song, but we're going to kind of play it a little more aggressive and in your face. So we can kind of mix over to the rock genre, but the blues is definitely the comfort zone for us. And we found a handful of other bands around town and surrounding areas that complement us well and that we've done several gigs with.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what we always say is we're kind of blues on steroids. And, we've done festivals at the Park Theater with like Arnie Matheson Band, anywhere to Lady Lee and Blue Noise, and we've done co-festivals with Big Dave McLean. So it's I think we're kind of a lot more versatile than most blues bands here in the city, and it's always good to kind of float in and out and keep one foot on the path of the blues and just kind of do the rest of the set where it needs to be to work the room.
Well, I think having that kind of ability to shift between genres too, like it's going to obviously work out in your favor in terms of introducing you to different audiences and then getting maybe the type of shows that you wouldn't get if you were just a straight ahead rock band or a traditional blues band. And so, yeah, having that kind of nebulousness where you can go from one to the other. I like that word.
I think there's going to be big words on the show.
Yeah. Happy syllables later.
Yeah, it's always great if you could sit on a fence, if you could, kind of do that and where it makes sense to fit into those pockets, I think.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Big Dave McLean too just a minute ago, and Winnipeg has this kind of tradition of guys like that who have been doing more traditional blues for decades now. What is your, as a band and maybe individually as well, what is your background as far as getting into this kind of music? Because I mean, blues as like an umbrella genre has obviously influenced so much stuff and has kind of morphed and converted into so many other styles of music over the decades and even like a century now. But being in Winnipeg and being in Manitoba, how did you get into this style?
Well, maybe I should go first on this.
Yeah, you start. Yeah.
Myself, I really got into the blues when I was in my mid-teens. That's when Eric Clapton put out Me and Mr. Johnson, and Aerosmith did Honkin' on Bobo.
Right.
I started playing guitar because I loved AC/DC, who once I learned what they did was just amped up blues. And that's where it started for me. And I started, going a little further back down the wedge. And I learned guys who like Mississippi Fred, Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters, Son House, Robert Johnson. I started learning who these people were, and I started getting really, really rooted on their music. And I just always always found myself, that was my comfort zone musically. And I just wanted to find like-minded people and, you know, kind of bring that on stage with us. And then I found first I found Steve, who is definitely just along for the ride, our sax player. He's a chameleon. He likes all kind of genres of music. Our bass player Jack, he's an old punker from the 80s, but he definitely kept one foot on the path, like I said, with the blues. He opened up for Muddy Waters in the early 80s in Thunder Bay, where he's from. And he was a big blues guy. So once the three of us got hooked up, we got a little traction. And then Dusty came into the picture, who was definitely more of a rock background.
Yeah, I'd say growing up, I was always a rock guy. That was my kind of bread and butter, what I was into listening. But like you mentioned beforehand, like blues, it's in the undertones of all of rock and roll and all that kind of stuff, right? So when I joined the band, I knew some blues. I was big into Clapton. I was big into a couple of the other guys. But I was kind of pushing more of a rock feel. And then kind of just fell in love with the blues as I started to learn the music and gain an appreciation for it. And as Dylan always bugs me, he says I'm a better blues singer than a rock singer. So stick with what makes the money, I guess.
I didn't think he listened to me, to be honest.
Well, maybe something about that though. I mean, like blues has always seemed like a genre of music where the element of soul is really important. I mean, it's very emotional music, just kind of at its core. And I get the impression anyway that there's a lot of people who are fans of that genre where they take it very seriously. I mean, there's such a history behind it, and the idea of well, just to rewind a bit, one of the things that comes up all the time on this show, whether it's I'm talking to a rapper or a country singer or a metal band, is the idea of authenticity and of people in Manitoba having a really good bullshit detector and kind of being able to, you know, identify when someone is not being themselves when they're putting out something artistic. Is that an important part of it, is having some kind of authenticity to what you're singing about, what you're playing about, especially in a genre that's so rooted in emotion and feeling and soul?
Blues is all feel. And again, that's in my opinion impossible to fake. You're either in it or you're not, right? And I think if like you said, the bullshit detector factor, right? Like it's easy to peg if somebody's kind of just going through the motions and doing it for whatever motivation. If you're not into it and feeling it, it's pretty apparent.
I would absolutely agree, and I think that's something we really take pride on, as we make sure that we have an appreciation of, you know, where we are in that link in the chain. I mean, our first album came out in 2018. There was 12 songs on it. 11 of them we wrote. The 12th we want to have a traditional blues song on it, and we ended up doing Preaching Blues by Sun House.
Okay.
And we just thought that was a great place to go to, like you said, be authentic. I think that's a great word for it, because the blues is about authenticity. Like Dustin said, you can't fake it. And it's something I think we really pride ourselves in. You're not going to come to a Deadbeat show without hearing a Howlin' Wolf song or a John Lee Hooker or Muddy Waters, or, you know, that has been a staple from almost day one. And here we are, you know, 12, 13 years later, and it continues to be.
Building on that too, though, you're not going to go to a Deadbeat show without getting a little bit of the history of it too. Like you're not going to hear it from me very often. I'm not the historian of all this stuff. Like I said, I'm a little newer to the getting into the roots of the genre, but you know, it's not very uncommon for Dylan to start off before a song and say, hey, this one's by so and so from 1936, and kind of give a little bit of a chronological history of what we're doing and where it's coming from, and basically just giving praise to the guys that started it out, right?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I think that's kind of a tradition, right? Too, is that because some of the stuff is so old, and it's been borrowed and mutated so many times over the years by so many different bands, right? I guess pointing out sort of the originators of this stuff is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just such a respect thing, and I think any good blues band has, or any band in general, has a respect for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that goes along with the authenticity thing too, right? Is just you're being genuine to what it is you're doing, instead of just phoning it in or putting on the costume and going out there and entertaining a hotel crowd or something. Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it.
The one thing I'm sick of talking about, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because it's affected everyone over the past 2.5 years, is the pandemic. And I mean, hopefully we'll get to a point where I can stop asking bands about it, but we're still at a point now where it has affected so many people to such a degree. What was it like for you guys? You got a relatively large band. It's not like a duo or a three-piece or something. What was it like trying to navigate sort of that situation where you couldn't necessarily get together to rehearse, shows weren't happening? Yeah, it was just kind of a for everyone, but I mean, creative people in general were hit pretty hard with it.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, we tried to get together when it was permitted, kind of thing, right? Whenever those pockets opened up, we made sure we crammed in a few rehearsals just so, hey, we can show face and see each other. Hey, man, how you doing? Kind of thing, right? It was a little further than a text message or a phone call. And then, yeah, just to get back into the music and to start kind of making sure we're not losing, groove, feel, all that kind of stuff, compatibility, right? And then when things started opening up for smaller things, acoustic duo stuff, Dylan and I started doing acoustic duo stuff just to primarily keep our name out there, right? Like, we don't want people forgetting who we are and what we do, and it's different than what we've ever done. Like, I'm newer to the scene than Dylan, but Dylan's never really done the acoustic thing either. But it was an avenue for us to go down in order to stay out in people's faces, keep the name going a little bit. We did one live stream from XQ's.
Okay.
So we were able to do that just so we can kind of get proper sound and everything recorded in there. So that helped put that out and got a little bit of traction on that. But yeah, it was difficult. There's no question. It was not a fun time.
I think there was also a little bit of a silver lining to it as well, which is probably a tough thing to say about a global pandemic. But the silver lining, like Dustin said, we got together when we could, but we get together religiously every Wednesday, and for the most part over the lockdown isolation period, we were still doing like a Facebook call where we have a few drinks and talk some blues, talk some music for a while. But then to touch on when we got beyond that with the acoustic stuff we were doing, I think it made both of us much more disciplined players, because when you take just everything out and you just have like the bare bones of it, right? Like you gotta hit your marks and be consistent.
There's no hiding.
It's very, very humbling. And I think that was a silver lining, because I think once we got past all that and that phase, when we started getting back together with the 5 or 6 of us as a full band, I think it made us stronger as a unit, where we paid maybe a little bit more attention to our individual parts. And I mean, I don't think I've ever said this to your face, but your growth over those acoustic gigs were fantastic, and it made him a much, much better singer and front man. So,
oh, that's sweet.
Has that experience, has that acoustic experience, has that made you kind of look at some of the existing songs that you have sort of from a different light? Like, has it changed maybe the way you approach some of the stuff you're doing now?
Yeah, there's no question. Hey, when you're doing something acoustically, like me from a vocal perspective, if we're doing an amped up song, I'm gonna get raspy and stuff like that. That doesn't always work with acoustic, right? It's a softer feel. So yeah, you got to completely change how you approach and attack a song. It was completely different.
Yeah, and like from my perspective as well, it's like it's easy to make a song sound big and full and fun when you have a full band behind you, but when it's just you and a guitar, it's like, wow, I gotta keep some open strings, I gotta keep some rhythm going as I'm trying to punch in the lead. And I think once again, one of the silver linings is when we started doing duo gigs, Dustin picked up a kazoo and
the north end saxophone, if you will.
And he started emulating like the sax parts of our originals with the kazoo, and then that kind of grew and now it's part of our regular show, and one of our originals that we have upcoming, it's featured on that. So that's where I kind of come with the silver lining part of it musically. So it you got to adapt, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like you found a good way to do it too. I mean, a lot of people I think struggled at sort of how to keep going when there's so much uncertainty, but doing that duo thing and the acoustic thing, it's taking it and from a new perspective, when you could actually follow the regulations and stuff and restrictions and still make music, that's cool. Is that something you hope to do sort of going forward as well? Are there going to be more acoustic shows, or now that you can do the full live band thing, are you going to stick with that?
I think we both agree that the live band thing is definitely more fun. Excuse me. However, having said that, our sax player, he's runs a business that is very slow in the wintertime, and he buggers off to Mexico for 10 weeks. So, that opens up some availability to do some acoustic stuff there. And we'll sprinkle some stuff in here and there throughout the year. But full band is definitely the main focus. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the spring thing, like Dustin said, would be more so rooms where like a full band doesn't really make sense. So it's opened us up to some different rooms and opportunities on that front as well. So
Well, and it's kind of like what you're talking about at the beginning too, with having the blues mixed with the rock. You have you're more available to different scenes and different crowds, and I guess that acoustic thing has opened you up to even more people who maybe wouldn't have otherwise thought they would be interested in a amped up blues band.
yeah, I mean it's versatility, right? It's versatility, it's adapting, it's working with the opportunities that are in front of you. And I think it's important to capitalize on not everyone, but as many as you can. So
Well, things that I thought we'd never do. Me personally, not a huge country guy. The acoustic, we sprinkle in a country tune, right? We've got a softer John Mayer tune. We've got Green Day. So not things that you'd expect to see from a blues band, but it allows us to open that door a little bit more and expand our musical genres and kind of try to appease to a bigger audience.
Is blues, I mean, and again, like like we've said a few times, blues has influenced so much other stuff, and touches of it are in everything. But have you seen any kind of growth or resurgence or anything like that in blues as a genre among other local artists? Like, are there people who are, and you've been doing this for a while now, are there people who are starting out who are playing similar styles or using blues in a similar way that you've noticed? Or is it still kind of limited to the traditional folks and then a handful of more rock influence bands?
it's definitely a lot smaller of a market than I would say. But for the first time in my life, I think that there are finally younger people than myself or ourselves doing blues. And that's when you're looking at Dana and Balls of Blue, or
Robert Andreas and the Redemption Band. He's a young dude. He's a huge blues guy. Chris Cadonio to Brandon. There's a lot of cool local acts that are starting out, and that are, some of them are actually fairly well established, that are bringing blues to the forefront. And it's cool to see them out there doing their thing, and it's great when we kind of link up for a multi-bill night, and everybody plays off each other, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
When one band goes out, it's like, okay, now we know where the bar is. The next band goes out, and it's okay, now that's where the bar is. And it's cool to have that, a little bit of a competitive streak, but at the same time, it's all supportive too, right? So
it's great to work together. I've preached that for years and years and years with this band. We're all in this together, so why try to work against each other? I know there's a lot of competitiveness out there, and I don't think we dig into that at all. We just want to be our own band. We want to do our own thing and work with as many good people as we can along the way, because we all have the same goal. We want to play our music, play our song, get our point across, and have fun doing it. And that's the bottom line. If you're not having fun, there's no point in playing music.
our kind of joke in the band is $1,000,000 or bust. Right? If we're not going to go out there, we're going to make $1,000,000. Well, damn it, we're going to go out there and we're going to have a hell of a time. So we know we're not making the millions. So let's go have fun and let's support everybody else. And let's kind of bring it together and have an overall great time.
Yeah, I like that attitude. I think that kind of goes in line with the bullshit detector thing too, because I mean, if you're not having fun and you're just going through the motions, people can see through that too, and they're not going to have a good time watching it, right? So yeah. At this point, I mean, the band's been around for a dozen years or so. How many albums do you have out?
We just released our first. Well, that's a long question.
Yeah, how many releases do you have out? Is that maybe a better?
Our first one we did officially was 2014. It was Blow Some Blues My Way. It wasn't very good. It was before we had Ham. We were still growing. We went into the studio. We wrote some songs and we recorded them. And it was very, very low budget, low key. But he joined us in 2016. And then we took 6 months off. We didn't perform. We didn't have any shows booked. We kind of just isolated ourselves down here. And we wrote our first album, which was Don't Tell Nobody, which came out in 2018. We recorded it early in the year, and it came out in the fall. And we rode that wave pretty much to the pandemic. As we came out of the pandemic, A friend of ours built a studio. He's like, come on over, record a song.
Cool.
We went there. One song turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into 5, turned to 8, turned to 10. And we're like, wow, we might as well release these. So we call it an EP. It's really an album that we came out with, which was our second official release, which is Another Tall Glass, came out in, this past November. So technically 2.5, but we'll just call it 2.
Yeah, that one's a blues cover album, so it's kind of an homage and us paying respects to a lot of the bands that came out and did it before us, and kind of bringing those songs to some people that maybe don't know them. And we're, like I said, our sax player goes away for a couple months in the wintertime, so our primary focus right now is we're in writing mode. So we got one song recorded, a new original. We got a couple songs that are getting close to that point, and we got a few to maybe a handful that are in the works, kind of thing. So it's a fun time.
Is that for? Are you hoping for a release this year, or is that just sort of up in the air at this point?
I doubt we'll have a release this year. It'd be nice to get everything recorded this year and kind of work on the mixing, the mastering, and maybe a spring, a year from now kind of thing release would be cool. That way we can kind of put some singles out and see how those do, and then when the whole thing's put together, do a big party for it.
Cool. And how can people hear you? I mean, the good thing about this being a podcast is, someone could listen to it the day it comes out, or they could listen to it a year from now, and by then maybe you have new music out, playing different shows. What's the best way to sort of, first of all, hear your music, and secondly, keep track of what you're doing as far as live shows and things like that?
YouTube and Facebook, absolutely the two of those. We did a release party for Another Tall Glass in November. There's 2 or 3 songs posted from that show. All you got to plug in is DB and the Deadbeats on YouTube. You'll find that, as long as a couple compilation videos. We have a few videos from our 2018 release. We have a couple of originals where we just kind of did like a still image with the audio, so you could listen to it around the house. So that, to listen to, is definitely YouTube. We haven't done the Spotify thing yet, but we're
Apple Music. We're a little behind the times. We're younger on the scene, but we're a little slower with the technology. So it's definitely something we're looking at getting into and getting digital stuff out there as well to make it a little bit easier to take a listen, for sure.
But the way to keep in touch with us is definitely Facebook. We're very active on there. If somebody sends us a message, we respond quick. All our gigs and jam nights that we host and stuff are always posted on there. So it's where to find the Deadbeats.
Cool. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes too, so people can just click right from there. Is there do you have anything coming up in the relatively near future, like in the next few weeks or months, that as far as shows that you want to plug?
Like I said earlier, this is kind of our slow season right now. We are hosting a jam next weekend, so that'd be the 21st of January. Outside of that, March 11th, I believe, at the Tap House is going to be our first kind of full band gig once our sax player's back in town, and that's where we're going to kick off our busy season.
Cool.